All right, this section is about negative exponents. We've talked about exponents and what they do. But now what happens if the exponent is negative, has a negative in front of it? Okay, it doesn't mean the answer is negative or the number in its entirety is negative. Okay, but what it means is that means it needs to go to the bottom of a fraction. Okay, and just some background here of why that's true. Another page. All right, so let's just kind of look and see here. If I had 3 squared, 3 squared is 9. All right, and 3 to the first, that's 3. And I'll even go up here 3 to the third. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. All right, now if I continue this pattern on down, okay, 3 to the 0th power, 3 to the negative 1, 3 to the negative 2, 3 to the negative 3. Okay, notice here the powers, the exponents are going down by 1. 3 to 2 to 1 to 0 to negative 1 to negative 2 to negative 3. All right, but over here on the answer side, 27 divided by 3 is 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So if I continue that pattern on out, I divide by 3 again. 3 divided by 3 is 1. All right, and remember in one of the previous lessons, anything to the 0th power is 1. That's why it's following this pattern. And so if I divide by 3 again, 1 divided by 3, is 1 over 3. Okay, or you could say that's 1 over 3 to the first power. All right, if I divide by 3 again, all right, if you went to your calculator and said 1/3 divided by 3, going right over here, 1/3 divided by 3, all right, we could rewrite that as 1/3 times 1/3, that keep, change, flip we do when we divide using fractions. All right, and that gives us 1/9. Okay, which is the same thing as 1 over 3 squared. And if you follow that pattern out, it's going to give you 1 over 27 for 3 to the negative third, which is 1 over 3 to the third. All right, so notice this pattern. This is the reason why we state the negative exponents do this. Okay, is because it's following this pattern. All right. So if you have a negative exponent, then it's going to bring it to the bottom, or if you see on this second one over here, if the negative exponent's on the bottom, we're going to flip it to the top and get rid of the negative. All right, so let's look at example 1. 3 to the negative second. All right, I'm going to rewrite that as 1 over 3 squared. All right, and for a problem like that, I might leave it like that depending on what my lab mastering wants, or you might just go ahead and say 3 squared is 9 and have it as 1 over 9. All right, for B, all right, I got 2x to the negative third. All right, but remember the exponent only goes to the thing it's right next to unless you have parentheses. So the 2 is going to stay where it is on top, okay, because if you have just a regular number 2, it's technically 2 over 1. So the 2, even though it doesn't really have a top and bottom, it's on top. And then the x to the negative 3 is going to become an x to the third in the denominator of that fraction. All right, if we look at C, we have a negative 1 power. So that's going to bring the 2 to the first on bottom, or just 1/2. Plus a 4 to the negative 1, so that's going to be 1/4 on the bottom. And then we could actually combine these by finding a common denominator. So you can multiply by 2 on top and bottom here in order to turn 1/2 into 2/4. And so you'd have 2/4 plus 1/4. And so your answer would be 3/4. All right. On D, we have a negative 2 in parentheses raised to the negative 4 power. So this turns it into 1 over negative 2 to the 4th power. Again, the negative exponent brings it to the bottom. And now we say negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. 4 negatives. Anytime you have a pair of negatives, it turns to positive. So you have 2 pairs, an even number of negatives. So it's going to be positive. And 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. All right, and then finally for E, y to the negative 4th will turn into 1 over y to the 4th. Okay, we need to put a 1 on top because a fraction with nothing up top just doesn't exist. All right, those are negative exponents. All right, try the practice. Here are the answers. Got 1 over 5 to the 3rd, which is 1 over 125. On B, I've got 3 over y to the 4th. On C, I've got 1/3 plus 1/2. That'll become 2 over 6 plus 3 over 6. When I find a common denominator of 6, which ends up giving me 5 over 6. All right, D becomes 1 over negative 5 squared. And when I square the negative 5, that becomes 25 on bottom, so 1/25. And then for E, that becomes 1 over x to the 5th. All right, if they're on the bottom, they move to the top. Okay, they basically, you can think about that fraction bar as the middle. If it's on bottom, it's negative, it moves to the top. If it's on top and negative, it moves to the bottom. So in A, the negative exponent's on the bottom, so it's going to move to the top, and so you'll get x to the 3rd. On B, then 3 to the negative 4 is on bottom. Okay, so that's going to become 3 to the 4th on top, or 81. All right, on C, you have a negative exponent on top and a negative exponent on bottom. All right, so what I would like to do is let's just look at the top. P to the negative 4th. It's negative, so it's going to change places. It's going to move to the bottom. So the P to the 4th is going to move to the bottom. Then I look at the bottom, the denominator. It has a negative exponent, so it's going to move to the top. So the Q to the 9th is going to move up top. So they switch places there. Same thing is going to happen on D. The 5 to the negative 3rd, that's going to become 5 to the 3rd on bottom. And then the 2 to the negative 5th, since it's on bottom, it's going to move to the top. So I have 2 to the 5th on top. And if you were to multiply those out, 2 to the 5th is 32, and 5 to the 3rd is 125. All right, pause it, practice it, come back for the answers. All right, here they are. I'll have s to the 5th. I'll have 2 to the 3rd, which is 8. I'll have y to the 5th over x to the 7th. Those switch places. And I'll have 3 squared over 4 cubed, which becomes 9 over 64. All right, example 3, kind of putting this with some other stuff. All right, A. Okay, there's 2 different ways we can think about A. All right, one is to do what I did on the last problem. Okay, I look at what I have. Right now I've got y to the 1st. Okay, it's up top, it's not negative, so it stays there. I look at the bottom, y to the negative 2. That's going to move, so it's going to become y squared on top. All right, and then we do what we did in a previous lesson with exponents. We have y to the 1st and y squared multiplied. That gives me y to the 3rd. Okay, another way to think about it is use that quotient rule. I've got y to the 1st over y to the negative 2nd. So I can do the division rule, which says subtract the exponents, which that gives me y to the 1 minus a negative 2. And then minus a negative 2 becomes plus a positive, and you get the same answer, y to the third. All right, so either way. All right, B. I've got the 3. It has no exponents at all, so I just leave it there. And then x to the negative fourth is going to move up top. So x to the fourth. And since there's nothing left on the bottom, I don't have to write a 1 on the bottom. All right, for C, got my fraction bar. X to the negative 5, that moves down the bottom. X to the fifth. The x to the seventh is not a negative exponent, so it stays where it is. Since there is no top, I go ahead and just put a 1 there as a placeholder. And then on bottom, I say 5 plus 7. That gives me x to the 12th in the denominator. Okay. You could also do the quotient rule like we did with A and say negative 5 minus 7, which gives me negative 12. And so that's x to the negative 12, which means that needs to go to the bottom. All right, and then finally D, if I have a fraction that's being raised to a negative power. Okay, one of two ways you can do this. My preferred method is I'm just going to realize the negative flip stuff. What's on top goes to the bottom, what's on bottom goes to the top. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3 over 2. I'm going to flip that fraction over. And I did it because of the negative exponent, so I changed the exponent to positive. And then it becomes 3 to the third over 2 to the third, because everything gets the power. And that gives me 3 to the third is 27, 2 to the third is 8. All right, another way of thinking about it is go ahead and put the power in there. And so it becomes 2 to the negative 3 over 3 to the negative 3. Everything gets the power. And then flip them. 2 to the negative 3 goes to the bottom. 3 to negative 3, since it has a negative exponent, goes to the top. And then we're back to the same place we were here. All right, so negatives flip from top to bottom and from bottom to top. All right, try the next problems. Pause it. All right, here are your answers. 1 over x to the fifth. I'll have 5y to the seventh. This will end up being z to the fifth. And then this one will end up being 9 squared over 5 squared, which is 81 over 25. All right, so this is a summary of all the exponents we learned, I believe in section 1 and now in section 5. Okay, we have multiply, means you add exponents. Raising power to a power, you multiply. Multiple things inside, everything gets the power, both if it's product or quotient. If you have powers on top, powers on bottom, you subtract. Something to the 0th power is 1, and then negative power flips over. All right, so it brings us to our last example, putting it all together. Okay, and some of these are a little difficult. All right, might have different ways to think about it. All right, so A. I'm going to go ahead and use the power rule. I'm raising multiple things to the negative 6 power. So that means I'm going to go ahead and multiply those powers in. Negative 3 times negative 6, that gives me a positive 18. And then 6 times a negative 6 gives me z to the negative 36 power. All right, and then I'm going to flip. The 18th stays on top because it's positive, and the z to the 36 moves to the bottom because it's negative. All right, there you go. All right, B. I'm going to go ahead and do the power first. All right, so 2 gets raised to the 4th power. X to the 3rd gets raised to the 4th power, means I multiply, so x to the 12th. And I also have that other x up there, all over x to the 7th. All right, 2 to the 4th. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. And then I got x to the 12th and x to the 1st multiplied, so x to the 13th. And then I have the x to the 7th on bottom. And then since I got x's on top and bottom, I can subtract. And so that gives me 16 x to the 6th. 13 minus 7 is 6. All right, C, I would go ahead and flip. All right, I would turn this into b over 3a squared raised to the positive third power. The flipping got rid of the negative. All right, then everything gets raised to the third power. B to the third, 3 to the third on bottom, and then since it was a squared, I take 2 times 3, which is 6. And then for my answer, I go ahead and do the coefficient out. So I have b to the third, 3 to the third is 27, a to the 6th. All right, D, I don't have any parentheses, so I'm just going to start moving stuff from top to bottom. All right, so let's look at the first one. 4 to the negative first. It's going to move to the bottom. X to the negative third. That's going to move to the bottom. All right, the Y is going to stay on top. All right, I'm going to change colors just to show you. All right, so I moved all the top stuff. If it moved, now I'm going to look at the bottom stuff. 4 to the negative 3. That's going to move to the top because it's negative power. So 4 to the third up top. X squared, it's going to stay where it is because it does not have a negative power. And then y to the negative 6, it's going to move to the top. So y to the 6th. All right, then I'm going to go through. All right, 4 to the third. That is 64. 4 times 4 is 16, times another 4 is 64. I've got y to the first and y to the 6th, so that becomes y to the 7th. On bottom, I got 4 to the first, which is 4. And then x to the third, x squared becomes x to the 5th. And then finally, I know that 4 will go into 64 16 times. So that becomes 16 on top and 1 on bottom. So I get 16 y to the 7th over x to the 5th. All right, and then finally, E. E. I'm going to go ahead and raise everything. Well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and move stuff. Well, I don't know. What am I going to do here? All right, let me go ahead and just raise the power. So everything gets to the third power. So negative 2 will get raised to the third power. All right, x to the third gets raised to the third power. So 3 times 3 is 9. X to the 9th on top. I've got y to the first, so it gets raised to y to the third. On bottom, the x will get raised to the third. And the y to the negative 1 will get raised to the third, so y to the negative 3. All right, and let's see if anything moves. All right, negative 2. It does not have a negative power, so I just need to multiply negative 2 times negative 2, which gives me positive 4, times a negative 2, which gives me a negative 8. X to the 9th stays where it is. Y to the third stays where it is. On the bottom, x to the third stays where it is because it does not have a negative exponent. And the negative exponent on the y means that y to the third gets moved to the top. All right, and then when we simplify, we'll have negative 8. It's not a negative power, it's just a negative number. X's, I got 9 on top, 3 on bottom, so 9 minus 3 is 6. And then y's, I've got 2 y to the thirds on top, so 3 plus 3 is y to the 6th. All right, there you go. All right, if you want to work those other ones, I will put those answers on Canvas. Good luck. Try these out. Try MyLab and Mastering. If you have questions, send me an email.